Greetings from the Minnesota Catholic Conference. I'm Ryan Hamilton, Government Relations Associate for the conference. And today's stop on our Faithful Citizenship Tour brings us to Edina, Minnesota, where I've caught up with Mr. Doug Fulton. Doug Fulton is running to represent Senate District 50 in the state legislature as the senator of this newly formed district, Senate District 50. And so we'll just jump right in and get to know our candidate. Doug, what motivated you to pursue this avenue of service? Why are you running for the state legislature?
Well, I appreciate, first of all, the opportunity to be here, and welcome to OLG, Our Lady of Grace Parish in Edina, Minnesota. This has been a wonderful community that my family and I have been part of for 22 years. We're celebrating our 75th year anniversary at Our Lady of Grace, and this past weekend we were lucky to be able to dedicate a brand new facility, a $27 million facility that you see behind me that includes a new gym, parish space, a preschool, additional middle school space. So it's a vibrant community. I'm glad you could be here today. I grew up in northern Minnesota in a big family, big Catholic family. We had 8 kids in our family, and my mom and dad raised us to be not only active members of our community, but in our school, but also active to understand what was happening in our community and in politics. My dad was involved, not as an elected official, but he was certainly involved in politics. And so from a young age, the Fulton kids were exposed to politics as we knew, to be involved in the community. So I went off to college. I got involved with a young Republican group at Dartmouth College. I got involved in being the president of the Dartmouth conservative newspaper called the Dartmouth Review. Eventually would find my way back to Minnesota, and I would go to work, and eventually got married and had children of our own. So I've been involved in commercial real estate for 35 years, and really in business, I have been in the business of really negotiating transactions with buyers and sellers, landlords, and tenants. So I really feel like I've got a skill set and a communication set that today, as I sort of look around at the issues we're having in Minnesota with the problems we're having with crime and the economy, I feel like this is a great year for me to be able to step in and put my business skills to work.
Great, thanks. So we understand that door knocking is a big part of campaigning for this type of elected office. What are you hearing from the voters at the doors, and how does what you're hearing align with the story, your personal story that you just told?
Yeah. Well, a big part of running for at least the state Senate seat is being able to understand what the issues are. And in our district, we have 87,000 voters, and we expect that it's a pretty high voting ratio in this district. So we anticipate there'll be somewhere around 52,000 voters. So you try and get out and talk to as many of those voters as you can. So you do that by door knocking, and we're out in the community 3 to 4 days a week, and we have been for the last 3 months. You know, the things we're hearing are the things that we're reading about in our newspapers and seeing on the television and hearing in social media. People are nervous, and they're nervous because we're seeing issues and problems and challenges in our community that we haven't seen this bad for a long time. People are nervous about crime. They're seeing crime sort of coming into Edina and coming into Bloomington, so they're nervous about their kids and their families, and how they're spending their time. They're nervous about going downtown Minneapolis. They're nervous about what happens after night. They want to make sure that their cars are in the garage, and these are things that we just haven't seen for a long time. They're nervous about the economy. Inflation has been bad, and when you combine that with being in a high-tax state, it becomes even worse. So they're wondering about how making decisions about where they spend their family dollars is important. And they're really worried about schools. We've seen over the last 10 years in Edina and Bloomington, even though the state spends more money every year, the reading and math scores have come down every single year. So somehow the families are saying, look, we're either not prioritizing how we're teaching, or we've got to figure out a different way to sort of deliver a different outcome. So those are the things we're hearing, and so since our campaign is really set up on trying to make sure that Minnesota and our communities are delivering for our families, those are the things that we're focusing on as a campaign.
Great, thanks, man. So unlike many advocacy groups, the Catholic Church's voice does not fit neatly into political distinctions. We do not speak as Republicans. We don't speak as Democrats, nor are we a single issue advocacy group. We do speak on a broad variety of topics considered by our lawmakers and aspiring lawmakers in St. Paul. If elected, we will be entering into a highly partisan environment. How do you plan to overcome partisanship in the policy-making process?
Well, you remember I told you I grew up in a family with 8 kids, right? And most of those kids, my parents had 7 boys, and their last child was a daughter, my youngest sister. So I grew up learning to negotiate for food and a place at the table, and who got to drive the car out on date nights. So I learned from an early age how to communicate and how to negotiate.
Sure.
But I will say that I do think that God has given us the ability to use our communication skills, and I've been blessed in the years that I've been out of school, the years that I've been earning and serving our community, to be able to take my communication skills and my work skills and bring people together. I've done that in my work, in our industry. I've been a leader in the commercial real estate industry in Minnesota. I've led a number of teams and continue to lead a team in real estate. I've been a leader in our parish here. I was the chair of the parish council over COVID, and have been a president of the men's club. And all those communication, those relationship skills are important when you go to the legislature and you recognize you have 201 legislators. Half are going to have sort of one view, half are going to have sort of the other. We need to be able to bring people together because we're so polarized today that we've just got to agree on the things that we have in common, and we have to agree to have robust conversation about the things that we don't have in common.
Sure. Well, thanks for giving us some insight about how and why you want to serve. Now let's get into some Q&A about issues that are on the minds of Minnesota Catholics. So we'll start with promoting the common good through promoting or prioritizing the economic well-being of families. And so according to Catholic social doctrine, the family is the foundational building block of society. This view runs counter to or in contrast to modern secular society, which prioritizes the individual and sometimes the state. Child rearing has never been easy or cheap, and it has only become more arduous as the cost of living, transportation, consumer goods, healthcare, housing, those things have skyrocketed. And so there's a growing perception that marriage and parenthood are mere lifestyle choices rather than fundamental vocations. And so these perceptions are substantiated by steady declines we're seeing in marriage rates amongst the middle class and working classes. So do you agree that despite its vital role, the family's well-being has been taken for granted or neglected?
Well, I think being able to organize our society around families is really important. And let me just say, because I don't think I've said yet, that my wife Cindy and I have 4 children. We have a daughter who's is out of the nest. She's 30 years old, and she and her husband have blessed us with our first grandchild. And then we have 3 kids who are still working their way through either high school or college. And so we've been raising a family for almost 3 decades, and it takes a lot of work, and it is expensive. And so I do think that I think families have been taken for granted. But I think the big thing to remember about is that as a state and as a community, we need to be able to support our families. It's expensive having kids.
Sure.
It's expensive, and it takes a lot of energy. So being able to have a tax system that works, that supports our families, having healthcare process that's competitive, that allows our families to be able to provide healthcare for their families, those things are very important.
Sure. Yeah, and you've kind of touched on this already, but what are some strategies that we can employ, we meaning society as a whole or as a state, community, to elevate the status of the family in our politics, media, and culture? So how can society better support families in their critical roles and responsibilities?
Well, I think part of what we need to do is we've got to be able to show off our families. It's take families that are in society that are successful, proud, doing all the right things, and let's use them as examples in terms of public relations, or as a church, we should be finding ways to be able to promote that. Right. I think about the British Crown last week. We lost the Queen.
Yeah.
And you think about it's not our country and it's a different society, but the royalty family is a good example of a family. And they had all the traditions of a family and the respect. Family is everything in that society. So, taking sort of those worldviews and taking views that we have even within our own church and being able to show examples of strong families. You watch TV today in the media, in our popular culture, it's not healthy. I mean, we spend a lot of time in our house picking programs that we can watch together as a family, because so many of our programs today that we see in culture and in the media are demonstrating, non-family, traditional families. And there's a lot of non-traditional families that are good, but let's make sure we're seeing everything. So that we take the family's traits that we want to be able to demonstrate and make sure we're including them in all of the media.
And so you're running for the state legislature, obviously. So to get a little bit more specific on this line of family, what role do you think the legislature can play in creating the economic conditions so that families, especially those raising minor children under 17, can thrive?
Well, I think we've talked about children being expensive. Meaning food, clothing, schooling, transportation, all these things are expensive. And so we need to create a system, a taxation system as an example, that helps support families. Minnesota's a high tax state. It has been for a long time, many years. It's gotten higher in the last decade. And so in our campaign, we're talking about, look, are there ways that we can support our families with a lower tax rate, a lower individual income tax rate? And so we're going to press on that, because you can't have a high inflation environment nationally and in your state and have that combined with a very high tax rate. And so we're gonna push down on the individual. We want to make sure people are coming to Minnesota, and we want to make sure we're not losing people from Minnesota because of our tax rate. And we've got other tax policies in Minnesota that, when I think about family, I think about mom and dad and kids, but I also think about grandma and grandpa and great grandma and great grandpa. And we do tax some things in Minnesota that have a huge impact on our seniors. One of them is that we tax Social Security income. So you work all your life to pay into a Social Security fund that when you finally have the ability to start using those dollars to live, only 8 states in the country, including Minnesota, tax those dollars. And it's a double taxation, and it's really hurting our seniors and our families. So that's another part of the tax program that when I go to the legislature, we're going to focus on.
Thank you. So moving, we talked about raising the family. What about protecting the family from normalization of vices and activities that harm the family? Specifically, in conjunction with promoting policies that promote the family, the bishops are actively opposing the legalization, normalization, and commercialization of addictive vices and substances. So would you support or oppose legalizing online sports gambling in Minnesota? And please share your reasoning.
Well, I will say that I think the genie's out of the bottle on legalized sports betting. We've had gambling in our state for a number of decades, and this online sports gambling situation is legal in 30 other states across the U.S. So I think in Minnesota we're gonna see the legalization of sports betting, and I'm going to support it, but I'm going to support it with a few caveats. I mean, there are lots of people who are on the internet today in our state that are doing this kind of gambling because it's available. And one of the things we can do by making it legal is we have the ability to control it, set rules in place, and govern how it's done, and we can also take advantage of the taxes that program and other gambling we have in Minnesota pays back to the state of Minnesota. So I am going to support it, but I do think we just need to continue to watch it, monitor it. With all gambling, there's always a potential for addiction, and as we've seen with other gambling in our state, it's important for the state to be able to be seeing how other people are impacted by it, and we've got addiction programs that we have put in place today to help those that have that issue. So I would support it, but I think we just need to continue to manage it and make sure that for those people that find themselves in a bad way because of that, we be in a position to help them.
Sure. or the next part of that is, would you support or oppose legalization and commercialization of recreational marijuana in Minnesota?
No, I mean I believe that the medical use of marijuana has been a very important way to help patients that have different sort of diseases today, and where medical use of THC has been helpful, particularly when it's under the guidance of a medical doctor. But I think there's been too many studies today that I've seen that link long-term marijuana use to brain activity issues, schizophrenia, other sort of related illnesses, to be in a position to say that it's a good idea for us to legalize marijuana. Even this bill that got passed in the last legislature, which was the legalization of THC gummies, up to a certain 5%, is we've got to be careful about that too, because we're introducing marijuana, THC, into a community that's with a drug that's legal, in a gummy beer form that is going to be attractive to kids. And so I just think we really have got to be careful about marijuana. It's a gateway drug. Most people will agree. You get hooked on marijuana, there are bad drugs and worse drugs behind it. So I would not support it. I just think long term we need to continue to watch it. And there are states that we can watch that have legalized this. And let's watch it and see what the implications are long term.
Thanks for all those answers. So now moving into supporting motherhood and women's health in a post-rural world. Catholics hold that life is sacred from conception until natural death, and that people at every stage of life, even those in the womb, should be respected, protected, and loved. Given that the overturning of Roe v. Wade is not the end, in our view it's the beginning. Abortion is still legal in our state, and now more than ever we need to create a policy environment where babies are respected in law and where women are not led to believe that abortion is their only option. So how do you think we can best support mothers before, during, and after childbirth?
Well, let me just say this, and I've been asked this a lot, as you might imagine, running for state senate. And if you are a woman in Minnesota today, you've had the right to free choice for 50 years, and in Minnesota you likely will have it for the next 50 years. It's in state statute, and the legislature is not going to decide that issue. It's going to be decided by a constitutional amendment. The voters are going to have to decide that issue. I am pro-life, and I respect the rights of the unborn child, and feel strongly about that. But I think what matters today to Minnesota are the other things that are affecting our families and our children, are these issues like crime and the economy and schools. We've got to, as legislators, sort of focus on those things that really have a big impact on our families today. But let me also say that I understand why this issue is so sensitive to women, and by the way, women and men, right? Because when women and men find themselves in a situation, it's important to be compassionate. Cindy and I, our fourth daughter is adopted from Guatemala. We adopted her when she was 3 months old, and we're very think about how grateful we are that there was a young mother in Guatemala who made a choice to have a baby and to give that baby up for adoption. Our daughter has come into our family, has been part of our family for now almost 15 years, and because of that choice. So we need to make sure that we're supporting women at all levels, and in the where someone's pregnant, we need to be able to support them there, and make sure that there's lots of decisions and lots of good decisions that they can have besides just having one choice.
Sure, thank you. So now moving on, we talked about beginning of life, birth, now move towards the twilights of our lives, supporting the dignity of life until natural death. So we live in a society that highly advanced medical knowledge, and that's enabled us to significantly extend life. At the same time, that same progress has enabled us, there's a throwaway culture such that the legalization of physician-assisted suicide, which devalues people who probably most need our compassion, and I'm talking about those with disabilities, the elderly, and low-income individuals. For Catholics, Physician-assisted suicide is contrary to the dignity of the human person. Legalization of physician-assisted suicide unnaturally hastens death when it is thought that the person's life no longer has meaning or purpose. So would you support our efforts to prioritize compassionate alternatives to physician-assisted suicide, such as hospice, palliative care, and help us enact policies that promote accessible, holistic, and dignified end-of-life care?
I would, and I think it's really an important thing that we do is to make sure we're supporting people in every part of their life. The one thing I didn't really get a chance to talk about in the last question was the importance of good child care.
Sure.
And as our families are raising young children, the ability to have a really strong and affordable child care program is important. We have got challenges in Minnesota with some of the regulations and the cost of child care. It's expensive.
It is.
I mean, it's the average cost of child care today in Minnesota is $16,000 per child. So, you have 2 children and a cost of over $30,000. That is such a high expense that, for a lot of people, it means that that one of the mom or dad can't work even if they wanted to.
That's right.
So we've got to be able to figure out to make sure we've got good child care services that's affordable, and we can do things to be able to have less regulation in that industry and bring those costs down. But yes, our kids get older, they eventually go to high school, they eventually go to college, and we eventually get older as our parents got older and as our grandparents got older. And I think about, we have got to be compassionate, and we have to create a way for our seniors to be able to grow old gracefully with dignity and be in a safe environment. I remember, and we've made a lot of strides in society. I remember as a young 10-year-old going down to see my great-grandma in a nursing home in Southern Iowa, and I remember with all my brothers saying, man, Grandma lives in a pretty small room with a roommate, and there's not much else going on, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then 30 years later, it would be my grandparents who were able to take advantage of some of the very early senior housing and the senior assisted houses that started getting built in Minnesota around the country 30 years ago, because the market sort of responded to it, and healthcare programs started supporting some of those programs, and they were able to live independent longer, and it gave them dignity. And then I remember my own parents. Now this is 10 years ago, when my dad was ill with dementia for a number of years. The fact that in our community at home we had state-of-the-art assisted living facilities that let you go from sort of assisted living into memory care, and allowed my mom to stay on one side of the facility, visit my dad every day. So we need to continue to provide those kinds of opportunities, and we need to be able to support the nursing homes today that are a vital link to keeping our seniors safe and well cared for.
Great, thank you. And so the last question deals with education. Many children in low-income families are trapped in underperforming schools, as families are not able to afford to choose the school that meets their child's needs. Do you agree with the principle that all parents should be given a choice to send their children to whatever school meets their family's needs, and that education resources, tax dollars, should follow the student rather than bureaucratic systems?
Well, I think one of the most important things that a family can do today is be able to support their child in an educational system and structure that works best for them. So I would absolutely support that premise. Today it's called, where does the money follow the student? If you own a home in our district, you pay property taxes, and those property taxes go to support the schools. And within the state of Minnesota, those dollars follow the child into whatever school they go. If it's a public school or a public charter school, they follow those dollars into those schools. But I would support even going further. I mean, there are private schools today that a lot of people elect to send their kids to, and they're spending more money than you would at a public school to be able to provide their kids those opportunities. And so I would over time support the concept of having the dollar assistance number follow the student into whatever school that the family decides is the best choice for their kids. And by the way, there's a lot of families today that are electing to homeschool. And so how about those families that have educational expenses and food? Those dollars should follow the same way, and they can be a tax credit, or they can be the state voucher money going towards whatever area that those families elect to. But it is very important. I mean, education is probably the most important thing we can do for our children, and it's absolutely the parents' right to be able to pick that. And as we think about school today, there's lots of challenges in school today. We're very supportive of the teachers. The teachers have a hard job today, particularly beyond the pandemic and all the issues that have sort of come out with that. We're seeing, and we've got specific proposals to help kids that have been impacted through the shutdown that happened related to the pandemic. There's going to be, and we're starting to see it already, a lot of mental health issues. So, as we're picking out what school works best for our kids, we need to be focused on how to help our students that have gone through a huge moment with this school situation being closed, and help those kids today.
Great, thank you. So Doug Fulton, folks. Doug, thanks for a wonderful conversation, and we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. We appreciate you giving us the opportunity to get to know you and what you plan on bringing to the table in St. Paul if the voters select you. So thanks again.
Well, Ryan, I appreciate it. Thank you for being here.